So this is Book 6, Section 19, lines 12 through 16. So in these lines, starting at Funera, we learn more about the religion and customs of the Gauls. More specifically, that the upper-class ancient Gauls valued having a lavish funeral and saw them as essential, mainly because they were strong believers in life after death, which also explains why they buried the dead with many of their earthly possessions, such as money. Caesar even reveals in these lines that the Gauls would practice human sacrifices. So, Funera sunt pro cultu Gallorum magnifica et sumptuosa. Their funerals for the culture of the Gauls are magnificent and expensive. Omniaque quae vivis cordi fuisse arbitrantur in ignem inferent. Here you start with the omniaque, and everything. Then you jump to the verb at the end of this section, inferent, and the prepositional phrase before that, in ignem, which is translated as they carry into the fire. And quae vivis cordi fuisse arbitrantur is translated next as a relative clause, which they thought had been dear to their heart for the living. Now this clause, from quae to arbitrantur, is a relative clause because it starts with the relative pronoun quae, or which. And here we have two datives right next to each other, vivis and cordi. So vivis is dative, and more specifically, a dative of reference. And cordi is a dative of purpose. So our translation for this section so far is, starting here, their funerals for the culture of the Gauls are magnificent and expensive, and they carry everything into the fire which they thought had been dear to their heart for the living. Here, as stated before, is where Caesar notes how the Gauls would include a dead person's material goods with their body during their funerals. So back to the translation, starting at etiam, this adverb. Etiam animalia ac paulo supra hanc memoriam. So even animals, and a little before this memory. Take note that the paulo here in this line takes the ablative case and is an ablative of degree of difference. Servi et clientes, slaves and clients, quos ab eis delectos esse constabant. Now this here is an indirect statement, so it is translated as whom it was considered to be loved by them. And just to make note that the eis in this clause here is referring to the Gauls that are being honored in the funeral. Justis funeribus confectis. So this is an ablative absolute, so it is translated as with the just funerals having been completed. And finally, una cremabantur. So this is were burned together. So to recap this whole translation starting at the beginning of line 14, back to etiam, even animals, and a little before this memory, slaves and clients, whom it was considered to be loved by them, with the just funerals having been completed, were burned together. And that concludes section 19.